started. Call the study session to order for Shelton City Council. We'll start with the pledge. Forgot my little badge you signed.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Tonight's study session is to discuss the development of the 2020 budget, and with that we have some materials for you that we've prepared with the most up-to-date information, and our Director of Financial Services, Mr. B. Miller, will make a presentation to you tonight, and we'll answer any questions that you may have once the presentations are complete, or during, if Aaron's okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. Aaron B. Miller with the Finance Department. Apologize for the tardiness of getting you some of this information, but we have been spending a lot of time putting together an overview of the budget. I hope you had a chance to look at that over the last several hours, or I think we sent a draft out yesterday. And I just kind of want to go over that. The overview is designed to be kind of your best friend as you look at the budget and understanding all of the changes that are in it. So what we provided you today, we did not change the cover letter. It's the same cover letter as last time. We just attached the begin. So there's no changes to that. But if you can turn to what would be page 1 of the overview, and I will tell you, we were fighting with Excel, so there's going to be 2 pages ones. There's going to be the overview pages, and then when we get to the funds, they're going to start over. But as we talk about the overview, you can see which ones they are. So has a lot of information in here, so please, I'm not going to go through it line by line, certainly, but I just want to give you the gist of what we're looking at on each page, and so please let me know if you have any questions, concerns. Starting on the first page, we just look at history of citywide expenditures and citywide revenues. The reddish color are the non-general fund departments, and the blue color are the general fund departments. And then at the top, you have the total of both of those put together. And it just gives some good information. How much are we bringing in? How much are we spending? And where are those from about a 30,000 foot view level? Moving forward then to the next page, that's another breakout. It's the same information in general, but it's a breakout in much more detail about by fund. So you'll notice that we just have the general fund in there as well as the rest of the funds. Revenues are on the top with the total at the bottom, and then just below that are the expenditures for the same period. In this period that we're showing here, the 17 actuals, 18 actuals, the 2019 budget, that would be the revised budget, not the adopted budget, the revised budget. We've updated the estimates. Actually, we haven't done that as much as the department directors have done that for us through September. So these are their best guesses at this point in time about where they will end up. They are estimates, so there may be some changes in there because we can't necessarily predict what will happen. Before I go much further, let me just kind of tell you the difference between what you received in terms of numbers today and yesterday as compared to the last meeting. So we've gone through, and on the personnel side, we've updated the medical and dental insurance amounts. That's across the board, how much we're paying. We were assuming a 5% increase, and I think a 4% increase in dental. We got the actual numbers, and some of the medical increases were actually 0. They stayed flat. So we went through and made all of those adjustments. We did an update for the COLA adjustment, the cost of living adjustment for non-represented employees. We had put in as an assumption 3%, and it came out at 2.7%. So it's not a huge savings, as it's just a part of the population of staff. But we did go through and do that. Departments went through and updated their year-end estimates for all funds, as well as the general fund departments. went through and did theirs. We also updated a few individual line items based on some new information that we've gotten post October 15th and until now, so we've done that. And then, of course, we went through, and especially in the general fund in particular, we went through and did some rebalancing to make sure that we were providing you with a balanced
Quick
budget.
question, just as you're talking, could you tell us, I'm now on page 2. Or one.
Yeah, you bet.
We don't have anything up there. Bob's on a different page than I am, but just say, okay, now on page 3.
Can do that. So that wasn't in any of the pages. That was just a little bit of changes. Yeah, that's a free. Back on page 2 then, gives you a good view of the different benefit and, revenue and expenditure levels by funds. Moving over to page 3, we break down the general fund into departments so that you can see a history of how much spending there's been in departments over the last about 5 years in total. I think one of the important ones to take a look at is about midway through page 3. It's titled 2020 Proposed Budget by Fund and Ending Balance. That's where we show you where we think, based on the estimates that we received, where we think the funds are going to end 2019 in terms of fund balance. Then we've put in there, the next column is the 2020 budgeted revenues, the 2020 budget expenses, and then the assumed ending fund balance, which is simply the beginning fund balance plus the revenues minus the expenses gets you to the ending. And then we have a dollar change column and a percent change column on there. It just gives an idea of where we think we're going to be. Again, nothing is set in stone here. These are based on the 2019 estimates that we've that departments have brought forward. You can see there's a lot of changes on there. We'll get to those because later on in the pages, we talk about what the differences are between funds. We do talk about a little bit about fund balance at the bottom of page 3, the importance of it. Moving forward then, we also talk about that for the general fund, while we don't have a new policy, there is agreement, this is on page 4, between the city council and the city manager that the general fund and the street operating fund will strive to maintain a fund balance equal to 16% of their current year budgeted expenditures. And the water, storm, and sewer funds will strive to maintain 20% of their current expenditures, current year expenditures. All the other funds, we don't necessarily have a fund balance level on them other than don't go cash poor. So we just watch that. There's reasons not to have fund balance requirements or desires in some of the funds, and we've talked about that a little bit prior. So continuing to move forward, we give a lot of information on staffing. Want to spend a little bit of time on this. So that first chart that you see is the citywide FTE count in the large block columns, and then the city FTE per 1,000 population. The top of page 5 gives you the chart of what you're seeing in that particular graph. Want to talk about some of the changes that we have for 2020. We have a new homeless resource coordinator position. It's 1 FTE that's budgeted in the city manager office, as well as a mid-year ad, so previously a mid-year ad for the economic development specialist position. That was added mid-year 2019. Again, mid-year 2019, we added a payroll and benefit specialist to HR. That was essentially a finance position that kind of got shifted over with the change of duties. Finance also retained that previous position, and we hired a fiscal specialist through that. So there's an increase there. In the Public Works General Fund Department, there was an elimination of a vacant associate engineer position. We budgeted a new parks maintenance worker, which is 100% funded by the Shelton Municipal Parks District, Metropolitan Parks District, excuse me. We also have an increase in the street fund of an operator position, a new maintenance worker in the sewer fund, and an increase of 3.5 FTEs in the storm drainage fund, which includes an operator position, or 2 operator positions, and a new maintenance worker, so that would get you to 3. The .5 is we shifted 50% of the city engineer out of Public Works General Fund and into the storm drainage fund to work on NPDES requirements. That's going to be a significant body of work. So we've just shifted there. That's not necessarily a change in overall FTE, it's just a change in where that individual is allocated. Some other information on there. We did want to mention that another staffing change, it's just near the bottom of the first paragraph on page 6 now. We created an administrative services director. That position will oversee the functions of human resources, risk management, payroll, and information technology functions. It's not a new FTE, it's a new position. The previous human resource manager position kind of fell away, and this one was created. So again, not an increase of FTE there. Then we provide the chart of FTE citywide by general fund department and by fund, and a comparison to 2018. We added the 2019 adopted numbers and then the mid-year, the August, because there were some changes in August that we wanted to capture as part of that presentation. And then we give a couple of colorful pie charts on page 7, general fund staffing by percent of total for the general fund and where those FTEs are, and then a citywide staffing as a percent of total. So the general fund is rolled up, and that accounts for just about 69% of total FTE staffing. Moving on to page 8, we provide a lot of information on property tax and assessed valuation. That seems to be a question that comes up. So we talk about assessed valuation. On the bottom of page 8, we show the total valuation for the city by year, starting in 2016 and then moving forward to the preliminary numbers we've received from the county assessor for 2020. We talk a little bit about that on page 9. We show the percent change by year in assessed valuation. So you can see it starts with 2017, the change between 2016 and 2017, where 2017 actually went down a little. And since then, it's been a steady increase, almost 16% increase in assessed valuation in 18, just over 9 in 19, and then at the preliminary numbers, an increase of about 8.1 for the 2020 assessed valuation for the city of Shelton. That assessed valuation is used for, from the city perspective, it's used for the EMS levy, the Emergency Medical Services levy, as well as the city's regular levy. It also is used for the Shelton Metropolitan Park District as well. Down near the bottom of page 9, we just provide some information on the levy rates and the assessed valuation and the levy rates. And then just at the bottom of that, just to give a feel, we just took 2000, we said, how much would you pay generally? This is a kind of, it's for demonstrative purposes, it's not an absolute, but how much would you pay for the city regular levy and the EMS levy if your property valuation is 150, 200, and 250? And that's just on there, again, for demonstrative purposes. Calculating levies is a extremely complicated endeavor, which I'm glad that we don't have to do. We're moving forward to the general fund. Am I going too fast? Just right about right? Okay. Moving to page 10, lots of information on the general fund. Starts with the general fund revenues. About the middle of page 10 is the revenue chart on that, and I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about what's below that chart. So really our general fund revenue projections for 2020 are based on the 5 assumptions kind of below that. The economy will continue to see modest growth. Modest being that tricky word that means a lot of different things, but we're expecting, we don't expect a lot of growth. But we do, at this point in time, we don't see the economy as a total reversing. Maybe later on, you'll see some more signs of it, but not as a total. Inflation will be modest, especially with the rates changes that have been happening, so it'll be not modest, which will only give a modest boost to sales tax and intergovernmental revenues. Short-term interest rates will remain low from their current level or decline over the next year. Revenue growth generated from permitting and construction activities in 2018 and 2019 will begin to normalize in 2020. And current percentage growth caps on property tax and utility taxes will remain unchanged, which we don't foresee the 1% changing or the 6% on utility taxes changing. So those are kind of the backbone of the revenue assumptions. Just want to talk real quickly about the changes. So tax revenue is budgeted to increase by about 1.3%, and for the mayor especially, I will just mention that on the page 12 at the bottom, we break taxes out so that you can see B&O and city utility taxes and all of that, so you bet. But overarchingly, or overall, tax will increase by about 1.3% over the 2019 levels, and it says see tax breakout below, which is on a few pages. Charges for goods and services is budgeted to increase by about $430,000 or 14.5%, and this is mostly due to the increase in the calculation for central services indirect cost changes that the city, should say, the city pays to itself. For those are services for finance, city manager, HR, IT, and all of those that funds pay in for that. I will say that the indirect cost plan is built using the most recently completed actual year. So the 20 plan is built using actual 2018 data because we don't know where 2019 will be, so we build it on 2018. There was a big uptick in expenditures between 2017 and 2018 as well. So the indirect cost plan, you would think just by functionality of being based at least partly on total expenses, would increase at the same time. And I know that we've been asked to provide some more information on the indirect cost plan, which we can do in 2020 if you'd still like. Intergovernmental revenue is budgeted to decrease by about $320,000. It's 43%, and it's mostly due to the loss of the one-time library grant that we received for library improvements. Funds and penalties we're budgeting to just remain about the same where they are. License and permits are expected to decrease slightly due to the expected normalization of permitting activity. I'm at the top of page 11 now. And miscellaneous revenue is budgeted to decrease. The reason behind that is we don't budget for donations. We get donations and we book them as revenue, and we did so in 2019. We got, I think, about $30,000, $40,000 worth, but we don't plan on that the following year, and so we don't build our expenditures around that. So that's the reason there. Then we have the breakout by type of revenue in the general fund, a pie chart there to give a little bit of information. The percent change in revenue, there are two charts on this, at the bottom of page 11 and the top of
Could I
page.
ask just a question? Okay, just a simple question. So donations, $34,000 in what, 2019 we received? And so could you, just for my own curiosity, it probably doesn't have a lot to do with what we're doing, but donations from people saying, I want to give the city money?
Yeah, I think the large one was for canine purchase, was $25,000, something like that.
For what?
For a canine program?
Some people
Yes.
said, hey, if you want to donate
They
to
wanted,
this, we will.
that's right, we get donations for parks and recreation activities, and those are the two big ones.
And you don't include in there if somebody donates a piece of property, that would not be in this 34,000,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
That's a separate, if somebody donated some property.
Yes, and we don't budget for that again. If they do it, that's great, but we don't.
Thank you very much.
You bet. So at the bottom of page 11, the percent change in general fund revenues, we show it two ways. The first chart at the bottom of page 11 provides the percent change in general fund revenues, and this is budget to budget. So it's 2018 actual, 2019 revised budget, and 2020 proposed. On the next page, we also want to show that because we include the 18 actual and the 19 estimate and the 20 proposed, because that does change the look of it a little bit. And we do go through and talk about decreases. The second full paragraph, a large decrease in 2019 budget as compared to the 2018 actuals in the first chart, a result of the creation of the street special revenue fund. And you'll see that a lot, because when the council created the street special revenue fund, it moved street activities, expenses out of the general fund, but we also moved the revenues along with it. And so that has a big impact. And that's kind of a theme that you'll see throughout this as we talk about general fund and some of the changes. Bottom of page 12 then is the tax breakout, and we provide on the top of page 13 a little bit more information about it. So the property tax is our second largest tax revenue, and it accounts for about 31%. Property tax is based on assessed on real property and is done through the Mason County Assessor's Office. All in all, the property tax level that we have in there as a proposed budget is the legal 1% limit, because the IAPD, the implicit price deflator, is 1.36, 1.37, something like that. And so you can either take the implicit price deflator or 1%, whichever is lower. So the statutory 1% is included. It includes new construction revenues, as well as state assessments, as well as refunds. So the total increase in property tax is not 1%. It's the 1% then plus those other functions. So when we get to the property tax ordinance next on the 19th, when we bring it up, you will see that it's not necessarily 1%. It's because it has other factors involved in there. And we've detailed that out on the ordinance. Moving forward then, general fund expenditures. Oh, sorry, I wanted to talk about sales tax. As we've talked about many times, sales tax revenue is budgeted to increase by 7.3% over the current year budget, over the 2019 budget. But our current year estimates are well in excess of budget. So when we look at the 2020 budget as compared to our 2019 estimates, it's about a 12% decline. It's about $400,000 that we're bringing sales tax down, and that again is the result of the construction activity the heavy construction activity that has accounted for about 25% of our sales tax. And so we want to make sure that as that starts to normalize, that we're not building ongoing operations based on revenues that may contract. So we've built that into the 2020 budget. General fund expenditures is kind of presented much the same way, and the chart of it at the bottom of page 13 provides the 18 actual, the 19 revised budget, the 20 proposed, and then the dollar change between 2019 and 2020, as well as the percent change. The top of page 14, we provide a little bit more information. I want to take a little bit of time on that for significant expenditure changes in the general fund with a plus or minus 10%. So the change in the city council department, which is a decrease, is driven by the salary and benefit changes of moving 2 council positions from the previous commissioner salary and benefit range. The city manager department increases by a full FTE, homeless resource coordinator, that we talked earlier about. And so their budget increases just a little. Information technology increase is really based on the non-represented salary schedule that I believe is scheduled for tonight?
19.
Next week, okay. Next week, and that's really just to try to bring salaries a little bit closer to market levels. Non-departmental, which going back a page is decreasing by about almost $1.4 million, just under. Accounts for the general fund expenditures which do not fit within any real purview of any of the other departments. Largely what we budget in this particular department are cash transfers to support other city funds and projects, And the large decrease in 2020 is reflective of the one-time transfers made in 2019, which are not repeated in 2020, and that includes all of the money that we're moving out of the general fund and into the street fund for transportation benefit dollars and the like. I do want to, the last sentence under non-departmental, the 2020 budget additionally reflects a decrease of $50,000 in general fund support for street operations. And the decrease in general fund public works reflects the elimination of the vacant full-time associate engineer and the 50% allocation shift from general fund to storm drainage for the city engineer. So, you know, we've already talked about those things. Then we break down, not in as much detail, but we do break down all the other different fund types. So in the special revenue funds, there isn't a huge change between 2019 revised budget and the 2020 budget, but we did want to mention a little bit that the street fund estimates for expenditures, the estimates for expenditures total just under 1.2 million. And the significant difference is that we had budgeted about $1 million of transfer to the capital improvement fund, which doesn't need to be made. The projects in the capital improvement fund, as we went through our estimates, as Craig Gregory went through his estimates, they're funded, so we didn't need to make that transfer. So there's a big change in the estimate. We don't expect that to happen going forward, so we are budgeting, I think, about $885,000 of a transfer coming up in the next year. And the street fund, again, it does have a new operator position. And the tourism fund, not much change there at all. It's just a slight change that it's used to account for activities, events, and programs to attract visitors to the city of Shelton. Debt service, not a lot to say here. The decrease of $98,000 is because we've paid off the debt on the Civic Center. That's driving that number. This is one of those we talk about a little bit in here. Debt payments are based on council or commission actions when they approved a bond, and there's really no legal authority not to budget those. So we always put those pretty much first thing in the budget, we put in the debt and then start building things around that. Capital Improvement Fund, we're just gonna touch on it here as we get to page later, 19 and 20 or something like that, we do provide a lot more information. Capital projects included for 2020 in this fund are street and transportation projects, including residential paving, chip seal maintenance, and Railroad Avenue rehab, also known as the Western Gateway. The Facilities Department, we've budgeted money for an uninterrupted power supply and the fire station ADA lift. In the Parks Department, we have budgeted money for Neeland Park expansion, Loop Field expansion, Northcliffe Neighborhood Park design, and Eagle Point Park design. Those are all funded through the Shelton Metropolitan Park District. And then, of course, we have the annual debt payment on the fire station bond. But as we get a little bit further in this, we have a little bit more information on our capital. Enterprise funds on page 16 at the top. Some of the significant changes in the water fund. Appropriation request includes $1,225,000 for capital projects in 2020, which include the main replacement, on-site chlorine generation, the supervisory control and data acquisition system upgrades, as well as the laydown yard. Large decline in expenditures in the sewer budget really is a strategic plan. The sewer budget appropriation request includes a new maintenance worker, but I think it's the next line, and funding for residential sewer blocks, but is using 2020 and perhaps part of 2021 to build capital for two significant capital projects, which are planned to be funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. Approximately 1.4 will be needed for the biosolids project, and then roughly about $2.5 million for Basin 4. So what we're doing there is we're building capital in that fund, so you'll see that fund balance go up, which is appropriate, because then on the other side of it, we'll start using that money at some point in the near future. The solid waste budget, we're budgeting everything we have for the C Street landfill closing. The storm drainage includes funding for 2 new positions, an operator position, maintenance worker. The 2020 budget also includes the shift that we've talked about a couple of times here in the city engineer's time. And the budget does assume on the revenue side a large rate increase for the storm drainage fund due to this fund's financial needs. And council will be considering that rate increase ordinance later this year or early 2020 is my understanding. We talk about internal service funds a little at the bottom of page 16 and the top of page 17. The main change in there is the equipment maintenance and rental fund, which includes dollars for a rear stow roadside mower, a flatbed truck with plow and sander, and a roller compactor in 2020. When you had this information on the 15th, it also included $25,000 for a Vector truck, which now we understand is going to be coming in 2019. So we've taken it out of there and reduced that 2020 request by that 500,000 and change. Then we have a couple of other budgeted funds, the firefighters pension fund and the library endowment fund. The firefighters pension fund for 2020 has been adjusted to be more in line with previous year's actual payments and the 2019 expenditure. So it's not that we're cutting funding to that by any stretch. It's just we're just trying to right size it to what we've actually been spending and what we think we'll spend.
Just a quick question, is that okay?
Yeah.
Is that all right? So on the firefighters pension fund, that's like the PERS 1 or whatever, right? And over time, as the PERS 1 people, not to push them off the end of the chart.
That's right.
But as they gradually get older, like we all do, all of us do get a little older, that as they pass on, then that fund will decrease. The city will no longer be obligated to, because that's a fairly good expense.
Yes.
I mean, and so, as that is something that's that we stopped that PERS thing way back when we realized that there was no ability to pay for all that stuff. So is that kind of correct?
That's exactly correct. It funds particular employees that are eligible, but as no one's joining that group. Let me say it that way. No one's joining that group.
You're a professional. That's an excellent way of putting it.
At the bottom of page 17, then, we start talking about capital projects, and I do want to spend a little bit of time on page 18 and 19. One of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to really start accounting for some of our expenses a little bit differently, and this is our attempt to put out there what our capital expenditures are planned to be for 2020. I think it's nearly $5 million, $4.9 million. So how we've presented this is we're showing the budgeted fund, and then within that, what we're calling the sponsoring department, and that's kind of the department that's going to take the lead on these things. The project title, and then as you see, it should always come to zero. So the top one was chip seal maintenance. The revenue is $200,000. The revenue type is transportation benefit dollar sales tax, and then the expense is $200,000. And so, those will, as actuals come in, it will change a little bit. But this is the funding sources for the projects that we're planning on doing. So you have the chip seal, the residential paving. I want to come back to the railroad if we can. From the street department. In parks, again, you have the Eagle Point Park design, the Neyland Park expansion, the Loop Field expansion, and the Northcliffe. Those are all, as you can see, the dollar amounts, and you can see what funding sources are all coming from. For facilities, we have the fire station ADA lift, which is a general fund obligation, as well as the uninterrupted power supply. Moving forward, the equipment maintenance and rental fund, we're showing the purchases that we're planning on making, and those are all just being charged out of the EM&R fund, which makes sense. And again, this is one of those cases where the EM&R fund collects money over time, builds fund balance, and then spends it when it's time to replace particular equipment. General fund, non-departmental, again, this is because it doesn't really fit anywhere. This is what we're calling just hold for capital projects, and so the plan is to transfer this amount into what we hope will become the Capital Resources Fund, which will be a special revenue fund, and it will just sit there until those dollars are dedicated for a specific use, and then we'll transfer them out of that fund and into the capital fund so that we can better keep track of those.
I have a question. It's a really silly question. But what is lay down yard?
Fred Gregory can answer that question.
Yes, what's the laydown?
With the property that we all toured for the Veterans Homeless Village, that was being donated to them, we need another place to basically store rock, pipe, things like that.
Okay.
It would just be a space to store miscellaneous things for public works.
Very good.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Capital Resources Fund?
Sure.
Specifically, what funds contribute to that and what funds can draw from that?
So the Capital Resources Fund will be part of our budget supplemental ordinance, which will be coming forward, asking council to create it. And the funds that will go in there would be any general fund dollars that we're going to hold for future capital use. Transportation impact fees would go in there. REIT dollars would also go in there. The original plan was to also have TBD dollars go in there. Now, that may have to change because there are rules associated with a special revenue fund that I think it's described in here, but there's a group called GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and they get bored and make all these rules that we have to follow. So one of their rules is governments, what we used to do is we'd create special revenue funds for where we wanted to kind of keep track of special items, even if they were general funded. And GASB came out and said that's not the intent. The intent is to have those be special revenue funds, and so I can't remember the exact wording, but they say something around a significant amount of revenue needs to be generated for a specific purpose. So that's why the traffic impact fees and all of that. They never provided what is a material amount of money. So the other organization, the Government Finance Officers Association, who we use as part of our standards and best practices, they came out and said, fine, we're going to assume 20%. So if we move, long-winded answer, if we move the transportation benefit dollars out of the street fund where they are now, it potentially, we haven't done the math, could drop that street operating fund under the 20% of revenues, which means that it would no longer then qualify as a special revenue fund. You can still have it, but then when we do our financial statements at the end of the year, we have to roll that into the general fund, and it kind of loses its identity once it gets rolled into there. So we want to keep that as a special revenue fund. So that would be the only hiccup to those going in. If we aren't able to move the transportation benefit district funds in there, then we would still treat them very much the same way, except we would treat them they would stay in the street department, and we would transfer those out of the street department when they're assigned to a specific project, the same way we would do it in the Capital Resources Fund. But right now, transportation impact fees and REIT and any general fund dollars that we would put over there, they get into the capital improvement fund, and it just kind of all meshes together, and we want to look at ways to be able to keep that a little bit more clear as we move forward.
I just have a quick question. It sounds like my sock drawer changed, but is that council approved to pull that money out of that account? Or is it
Yeah,
going to be a
it
huge
would-
slush fund and you can pull it out whenever you want to?
No, it would be budgeted. So at this time next year, as we go through the capital, we'd be saying the funding for this is traffic impact fees in the Capital Resources Fund, and it would be the capital resources fund, the only expenses in there would be transfer outs. So the money that's in there, the council would have to approve the transfer out budget. It's the same as any other fund. The council is responsible for setting that budget limit, and we can't go over that without permissions.
Okay.
So,
It's a point of clarification. So for example, the Capital Resources Fund, an example of a transfer out to another fund, is that possible to Storm, for example? Could we do that? Say it, for
yeah,
example, one more
it
time.
could be. It could be, yeah. Typically, the enterprise funds are designed to run like a business, and should the user fees that are associated with those, the storm rates, should fund ongoing operations as well as capital needs. And the idea behind that is that those fees need to be set in a manner that provides that. There is no rule that says general fund that's transferred into the capital resource fund could not be used to help a storm. General fund can be used for any good governmental purpose. Where you would have a little bit of more issues is you can't use traffic impact fees for a storm project. But a storm project could have attributes that are traffic impact fees eligible. And so what we would do on that, as we go through some of our desired accounting changes and chart of account changes, we transfer that TIF money into the capital improvement fund, into the capital fund, with the same project as the storm project, so that at the end of the day, we can say the overall cost of the project was $1 million, storm paid 800,000 of it, and transportation impact fees paid 200,000, and so that we can keep those separated and say that 200,000 was for these intended purposes for that fund. And so it's a little bit better way to cost account for those projects.
If I may, one more. So vice versa, taking from storm to the Capital Resources Fund is not possible or possible?
It would be possible, but from an accounting perspective, you don't need to do that, because the enterprise funds, they have their own capital projects within them. And so the projects that you see here under the water and under the sewer on page 19, they're all taking place in those funds. It's not really a transfer out of that, but they're accounted for as capital in those funds.
And then my only comment to wrap this up, my portion of this chat, sorry, thank you very much, is, so you would agree that government finance and accounting is not like running your own personal checkbook at the end of the day, correct? It's a little more challenging than that, so.
Yeah, one of
As you
the misnomers is that you can run government like a business, but because government is fund-based, it's
Right.
not really able to run like a business, in many respects,
Thank you.
But not all.
but not all.
Thank you.
Especially in the, that's, the enterprise funds and the internal revenues, internal service funds are designed to run like a business. That's why the monies that come in really support those activities. I did want to just go back we hadn't gone through page 19. So water fund, you can see the laydown yard, which we've talked about, the main replacement, on-site chlorine generation, and the SCADA updates. In the sewer fund, there's the residential sewer blocks. Solid waste is the landfill closeout. Storm is capital equipment. I probably didn't update that from a different chart, so we'll just assume that's, well, it's only $8,000. I'm not sure what that is. And then the salt bin building, which is in the street fund, are the capital projects planned for 2020 and the sources. I want to just quickly go back to the Railroad Avenue rehab as well as the salt bin building, because when we bring forward the ordinance for council adoption, I think right now what we're showing is that the street bin building will take place in the street fund. It should be in the capital resources fund, so we'll have to change and put a transfer out and a transfer into there, so it will change the numbers. Well, especially in the capital the capital improvement fund, it will change the numbers a little bit. And in the storm, it will just go from a capital $90,000 capital to $90,000 transfer out, but it will just change the category for that. One of the things about capital projects that's different than other funds in the general fund, special revenue funds, enterprise funds, internal services funds, they lapse at the end of the year. So you don't carry those operating funds forward. For capital projects, the budgetary level is at the project level. So what we don't want to do is budget, a $3 million project in 2019 where we only spend $1 million and say, well, there's $3 million left to go, and so we budget another $3 million and we only spend $1 million, and then we budget $2 million, because at the end, it looks like the project was budgeted for $12 million, and it's really just that $3 million. So for capital projects, once you budget them in 1 year, that budget carries forward, and the only time that we have to go back and amend that is if we didn't budget enough, and we have to go back and we have to amend the project budget. So, long story, just a little bit longer. The Railroad Avenue rehab, we're working in partnership with Public Works, trying to figure out if those expenses were budgeted in 2019, then we don't need to budget them again because it's in a capital project fund, and we don't want to budget them again, as well as some of the revenue. So there may be some changes here. What we bring forward in the ordinance between that particular project and the salt bin building, but I just wanted to add those clarifications. The rest of the budget overview is pretty boring. It just talks about kind of the budget process and legal interpretations, and then on the back of page 20 we have the budget calendar included on there. And I realize I'm running out of time here, so I just want to quickly walk through some of the changes on the fund pages, or if it's in the general fund. So let's go to the finance page, which is on the new, starts on page 10 of the fund pages. I'll use us as a guinea pig. So when we presented the information on the 15th, by necessity, they were at this very high level. It was, I think, salary, benefits, supplies, and capital, or something like that. We've been spending a lot of time, Don has actually been spending a lot of time going through and breaking that out to a little bit more digestible chunks. And so in the finance department, there are 3 real divisions. There's the utility billing, there's the accounting division, and then there's the recording services division. So at the information received on the 15th, those were all lumped into one, and so we've broken out those divisions, and we've included a little bit more detail on them so that as you're looking through this, again, it's a little bit more digestible. So if we just start on page 10, I'm not going to go through this line by line, but the top part is the accounting division and breaks down, and then we have the subtotal for those activities. The next part down, it doesn't say accounting, it says city clerk record services. That's because the city clerk actually charges to the finance department for these particular things, but it's really, we don't have any control over it, so to speak. So we're showing that as a city clerk function in here. And then, of course, on the next page, the utility billing, it's kind of back to the finance. So we're trying to give a little bit more information about the larger breakdown, or the more detailed breakdown within each individual level. And then we still have the funding levels for 2020. Based on that, it looks like I think we have to update it, because I don't think we updated the admin support position to go back to full-time on this.
No, it is.
Is it?
Moved up to the full-time.
No, that's how much I know. I didn't work on these. No, I'm just kidding. Again, and as you go through this and leaf through it, that's how these fund pages are now built, and we hope that that gives you a little bit better look into the 2020 budget. So with that, I think That's
Thank
about
you,
all the
Aaron.
time I have.
What, more questions or comments for Aaron tonight?
Thank you, very thorough, and well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Very good job. I would say that this is a very well put together process, and from my humble first glances, you seem to be brilliant.
Well, thank you. It's not,
But just
I'm just,
first glance.
I'm just the water boy. It's the staff that do everything. I just get to stand up here and make speeches.
Complicated thing.
I have to get him out the door.
Yeah,
Help me out.
we'll have a sip of water.
Open up both of them.
Just at first glance.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
hearing none, thank you, Aaron, very much. Okay. Anything else for that purpose, Jeff?
I don't believe so, Mr. Mayor. I'm just very pleased with how the budget process is developing, and everything we're striving to do this year is make sure that the council has the full information up front, and that we're very transparent about how we're spending dollars within the city and how we're planning to spend dollars in the coming years.
I think everyone appreciates that very much, so. Anything for Jeff? All right, we will adjourn then. Regular meeting will start at 6.